Now I should like to share with you a few thoughts, a few divrei Torah on Tisha B'Av. Most people, if asked, would say that there are only two temples. The first temple built by King Solomon, and the second temple built by the returnees from exile in Babylon. The truth of the matter, however, is that there is also a third temple. By this I don't mean the third temple which will be built by Moshiach, we hope very soon in our days, but rather a third temple which was built already over 2,000 years ago. You see, when King Herod, who actually was no great friend of the Jews, saw that he caused so much alienation amongst his Jewish subjects, he decided to do them a great service, which was to renovate totally the second temple. To do so, he uprooted the second temple from its foundations and rebuilt a glorious third temple in its place. This building was so beautiful that the Talmud tells us that someone who has not seen the temple as it was reconstructed by King Herod has never seen a beautiful building in his life. Now the interesting thing is that we don't consider this third temple, which was built by King Herod, as a third temple at all. We consider it merely as a continuation and as part of the second temple. And the question is why? After all, he totally uprooted the second temple in order to build the third temple, which is far more beautiful. Not only that, we know that when King Solomon built the first temple, there were phenomenal celebrations. They in fact lasted for a full 2 weeks and took in Yom Kippur and the festival of Sukkot. Indeed, that was the only time in history since it was given that the Jewish people did not fast on Yom Kippur. Similarly also, when the Jews returned from Babylon and built the second temple, there was a day of great celebration. It occurred on the third day of the month of Adar, in the 6th year of the reign of King Darius. This is what we read in the Bible itself. And yet, when it came to the temple as reconstructed by King Herod, we don't know about any dedication ceremonies. Although the rabbis are effusive in their praise of what Herod did. This calls for an explanation. Try to understand this. When the Jewish people returned from exile in Babylon, they were impoverished. They built the temple to the extent that they financially could. But truthfully, there was nothing grand about it, nothing grandiose about it, so much so that the people who stood there at the time of its dedication cried when they saw the temple. It was nothing like the first temple. Not only that, even some of the holy vessels of the temple, for example, the menorah, were built on a very cheap scale. In fact, they didn't even have money to make a menorah. They took 7 spears, stuck them in the ground, and put lamps upon them, metal spears, not gold. However, when they could afford, they gradually improved the temple. They made it more beautiful. They made the menorah more beautiful. So much so that by the time of the end of the second temple, the menorah was the beautiful golden 7-branch menorah that we associate it with. So in other words, they started off small and gradually made it better and better, fancier and fancier. When King Herod was renovating the second temple to the extent that he totally pulled it apart to rebuild it, neither he nor the rabbis of his generation viewed it as a building of a third temple. They merely viewed it as what was expected. When you can afford more, you can do more. Because Herod had the ability to build a better temple, he was expected to build a better temple. Not really build a new temple, but rather to improve that which was already there. Because what is acceptable when you can't afford is not acceptable when you can afford. There's nothing glorious about doing what is expected of you. When a poor person brings a simple sacrifice, God says, "Areach nichoach." This is such a sweet incense. If, however, he becomes wealthier and he continues to bring the same kind of sacrifice that he brought when he was poor, God says, "I don't accept that." He has to improve his sacrifice. If later on he becomes even more wealthier and he brings the same sacrifice that he brought when he had middle wealth, again it's not accepted. Because every person has to bring according to their ability at that particular time. This is not something to be glorified. This is something to be expected. We have to constantly improve. We have to constantly grow. And therefore, when Herod built the third temple, it wasn't really a third temple. It was what it was expected of him in terms of improving that which was already there. Sure, this time he actually uprooted the second temple, but that too was expected of him. You have to be able to constantly improve, constantly make better. And therefore there was no dedication ceremony, there was no grandiose excitement. It was merely a fulfillment of what was expected. We can understand this in terms of what the Kotzker Rebbe said. Kotzker Rebbe said, if a person does today merely what he did yesterday, he should ask himself, what right do I have to be alive today? Every new day that I have extra strength, I need to contribute more. If a person feels stronger today than he was yesterday, he has to physically give more. If a person is financially better off than he was yesterday, he has to financially give more. If a person is intellectually more developed today than yesterday, he must study more, he must teach more. We always have to do what we can do at this moment of time, never resting on our laurels saying that, look, we always did it this way, we'll continue to do it that way. What you did yesterday was okay for yesterday. It's certainly not okay today when you have greater capacity, when you have greater ability. I believe that this is a very powerful lesson which we all need to apply in our lives. If God has blessed us with more today than we had in the past, it's our responsibility, it's our obligation to contribute more today than we had in the past. This is not a matter of grandiose ceremonies. It's not a matter of new dedications. It's not a matter of receiving accolades. It's what is expected. And as a community, we are now doing precisely that too. We are renovating our shul. Our shul may have been okay the way it was built in the 70s. In fact, it was not only okay, it was fantastic. Those who built the shul had great foresight. But what was okay in the 70s is not okay today. We all need to get together to ensure that the shul in 2010 reflects our abilities, our needs of 2010. May God bless each and every one of you, and may indeed we all be merit, we all be zeichet to the building of the third Beit HaMikdash, the true third Beit HaMikdash, which will not be evolutionary like the temple of Herod, but which will be totally revolutionary. And at that time, indeed, there will be a dedication ceremony. There'll be a shir chadash, a new song that we sing, Al Ptutenu, on our redemption. May God make it occur speedily in our days, in your days, in the days of all of the house of Israel.